Yes.
Somebody needs to mute.
Go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the Water Resources Advisory Committee meeting for today, Wednesday, February 3rd, 2023. And we'll go ahead and ask everyone to do introductions. So your name and who you're here from. And so we'll do everybody in the room, and then we'll check in with.
How many do we have?
Online as well. As a reminder, must be present to be a voting member today.
15 total.
Listening in online. If you're online, please mute yourself until you're ready to go. Okay, Christine, let's start over here. We'll work around.
Christine Mulholland, environmental network. Beverly Joyce Tennyson, Michelle Ellis.
EP, Portland CSD. I'm David Shipping, Environmental Relations.
Linda Chipping, Coastal San Luis, RCP.
Eric Greening, Environmental at Large.
Billy Dodds, MPL CSD.
Deborah Logan, Templeton, CSD. I serve on the board of directors.
Good afternoon, Greg Merchant, San Luis Obispo County Farm Bureau, filling in for Steve Carver that time.
Lee Nesbitt, EPC.
We did so, Cambria CSD.
Okay, last year, and County Stormwater Program Coordinator.
Taylor Simpson, Development at Large.
City of San Luis Obispo Water Resources Manager.
Eric Violet, I'm the alternate for District 4 Rep. Challenger.
Tim Walters, Development at Large. I'm actually moving to Walters. Brandon Zuniga, County Treasurer. Brandon Zuniga, County of San Luis Obispo Public Works Water Resources Engineer.
Troy Barnhart, Slow County Public Works.
Mike Nordstrom, District 3.
Joey Style, Slow County Public Works. And Brendan Clark, Slow County Public Works, also RAC Secretary.
Great. And I didn't say myself, I'm Andy P. San Luis Obispo City Council and Chair, and Ray Dienzo is our Vice Chair.
There was one person in the back table.
Yeah, sorry. I'm Jim Williamson. I'm County Public Works, Water Resources.
Great, thank you. And then let me go ahead and just for our folks online, I guess the room can't see the.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can do that.
Can you do that? Great, thanks. So I'll call on you, and then if you, in the order that I see you, and then just unmute and again, say your name and your organization. Jim Babcock.
I'm just a observer. I'm a consulting geologist. I'm out of Napomo.
Okay.
I used to attend these meetings back when I was working on some water projects for the city of Paso.
Great, thank you. And we take our time with the introductions just because we feel like a lot of what the purpose of this group is for connection and networking so that we can have that regional collaboration, but you're always welcome to pass if you don't want to do part of the introduction. Laurel.
Yes.
You want to introduce yourself and your
Well, I'm just piling into the car because the call that was supposed to come in the middle of the meeting is not coming. And so I'm coming over to Slow. So I'm here in my car and I've got my dog with me. I'm Laurel Barton from the Morro Bay City Council.
Great, thank you, Laurel. All right, Steve.
Steve Sinton, Shannon San Juan Water District.
Great, Patricia.
Patricia Wilmore, Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance.
Great, Greg at Wallace Group.
Greg Holbert, Civil Engineer at Wallace Group.
Thank you. Toby Moore.
Yeah, good afternoon. Toby Moore, Water Resources Manager at Golden State Water Company.
Thank you. Stacy Inman.
Hi, Stacy Inman, new City Council member at Pismo Beach.
Great, thank you, Stacy. May Theory Kaiwa.
May Theory County Public Works.
Thanks. Jeff Edwards.
Yes, hello. Jeff Edwards from Los Osos, land use in the private sector.
Right. Matt Scudato.
That's correct. Yeah, Matt Scudato, I'm with the Water Agency, Santa Barbara County.
Hello.
Thank you. Mark Zimmer.
Good afternoon, Mark Zimmer, General Manager for Golden State Water Company.
Thank you. Alan.
Alan Duckworth, representing District 5.
I have Blaine.
Yeah, Blaine Reilly, County of San Luis Obispo, groundwater sustainability.
And Lauren Gordon.
Lauren Gordon, Senior Hydrogeologist at GEI Consultants. Thank you.
Thanks. Did I miss anybody online? Or in the room? Okay. Great. Well, thanks again, everyone, for being here, and appreciate the time. Let's see, we have 2 meeting minutes to approve since we didn't meet in December or January. So we have, let's do first the October minutes. Any corrections, comments?
Who is that?
So we have Tim for motion and Christine for second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Let's go on to November minutes. Any comments or concerns? Excellent.
I will move adoption of the November minutes.
Thank you. Eric Greening makes a motion.
I have a question about this.
Yes. Well, let's go ahead and take our second. Is that right, Richard? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, discussion.
Yeah, well, there's an item on these minutes, number 4, considering the ad hoc committee review of bylaws.
Yeah.
And we were unable to do that then, but I don't see that coming up again on the current agenda. Is that something we're going to skip this year or worry about it later?
Yeah, such a good catch that Brendan and I only noticed today that we didn't put that back on the agenda. So since we didn't agendize it for this one, we'll agendize it for the next one. Because I think it's still worth doing. We just lost track of it.
Yeah, it was my fault.
That doesn't require an amendment to the minutes.
But it was an excellent question.
It was a question. It wasn't.
Okay, any other?
The motion stands. It was part of the discussion.
Right.
Any other discussion or comments on the approval of the November 2nd, 2022 minutes? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I've done this before. But as we have somebody says something and somebody commented, and there is no substance to what was said and what was commented. I find these minutes as they stand somewhat confusing. The answer I actually brought this up last time was, well, you can go to the tape and listen to it if you really want. But you have no clue as to if staff could put just a little more meat into what was said, just a couple of sentences, so you know, oh, that really does interest me, I will go to the tape. That would.
Case in point, for example, top of page 5, he's making comments on the inconsistencies with the rainfall season. Basically, July 1st and October 1st were the substance of that, because there are apparently 2 different ways of keeping count. So that, I think the meaning is clear to us, but I think David is right to people who weren't here and want to use the minutes to figure out what we're doing.
Thanks for that comment. Yes.
So I just have a comment. These minutes are very similar to Templeton CSD report. More details, they listen to the recording. And I believe that's like a lot of agencies. These are the- and I know the board of supervisors does the same thing. It's not unusual.
Yeah.
You got my being late and comment. These are actually far more consistent than the see what was on the agenda, something that they don't see.
Tim.
Question, and I'm wondering, and maybe it is there, but I'm just wondering, if add a link to the tape on the minutes.
Yeah.
So if somebody is there reading through this. I'll honestly see that too, but you know, then just clicking and go through.
Yeah, that's easier to view than other things. But, you know, put a timestamp for the item before going through the recording anyway. I can do that, something, look packaging. Okay. I think, yeah, we'll try that out. Yeah.
Comments noted. Yeah, we do have this discussion with some.
The question is basically, if someone is paid for a considerable investment of time to do. If that is the case here, the case is going for ultra 0 minutes. If you want to see truly detailed quality minutes, is I can make them. But she is paid and supported to do exactly that.
And I would argue that it's counterproductive. I think having that lengthy of a minutes that people don't read them as well, and it's really challenging to capture accurately what people are really saying unless you're like doing a verb or something and can actually just be misleading. So try to. So I feel like we hit the right personally. And
Otherwise, you'd have a court reporter in here putting everything
yeah,
down.
yeah, right. So I think it hits the right balance. I mean, again, comment noted if there's, you know, an even bigger hint as to what is in the content, but I would hate to go to the level of slow call, honestly. So there you go. Great. So let's move on. And I want to, let's see, we are going to go ahead and
Yeah, 4.
yeah, do item 4, and then we're going to flip item 5 and 6, which is already reflected here.
No, I didn't want to change it. But
Yes, okay.
I have it in order in the slides, yeah.
Great, so we're going to do, consider endorsing the application for Taylor Simpson. And then have an open, then we're going to go to the low impact development manual and followed by the storm and flooding discussion. Taylor Simpson.
Yeah, so just real quick, for our at-large, the role of the group is to kind of endorse that, yes, this person fits what the bylaws say for, you know, a development at large, or we'll do this for any of our at-large, you know, does this person fit the intent of this at-large position? And so the committee doesn't have the ability to say, you know, no, and then that's it, but they can comment on, yeah, this person fits the intent of our bylaws. And I reflect that in the board letter when it goes to the board. So Taylor is here. Yeah.
Let me give Taylor a little intro. I've been on this group, you know, over a decade, and I really believe it's a great influencer on how things are developed with regard to water, you know, sources and issues that come up, water mass like that. And Taylor is with Abbott Reed in town, and he is very interested in water resources and how the community of San Luis Obispo grows over time. Is intended to, and he's young. See, I'm getting the fat old. So the idea is, you know, move Taylor in and get some new fresh ideas. So with that, I'll introduce Taylor.
All right, Taylor, can you say hi to the group and
Yeah,
maybe
hi.
make some comments?
My name is Taylor Simpson. I work for Abbott Reed. We're a general contractor and developer. We focus most of our work in County of San Luis Obispo, but we do also go down to Santa Barbara. My role with Abbott Reed is evaluating our acquisitions and development team. So obviously through that process, there is, as Tim said, a major interest in our water resources and how those can be deployed effectively, efficiently through our housing developments that we provide to residents of San Luis Obispo and San Juan County. So I'm looking forward to this and looking forward to learning a lot and connecting with all of you. And yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Taylor in terms of his background or anything? Folks online, if you do have questions, please raise your hand and your virtual hand if you can. So do we ask for a motion?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have a motion that would involve making a recommendation? Christine?
Yes, I recommend to include Taylor Simpson as our new advisory body member. And hope he's willing to be as irreverent as some of us often are. I will second that and parenthetically note that my very wonderful, my own very wonderful alternate has now taken a new position representing the 4th Supervisorial District, and so there is an opening there as well. But I will be very glad to fill this opening with Taylor. So I will second the motion.
Great, thank you. And then does that automatically, does Tim roll
Yes,
back to
as part of
alternate?
the item, we'll move.
All right, with much
He asked
gratitude
for it.
for all.
I'll
of
be
you.
around for another.
Yeah.
Through 2024, I'll try to find some alternatives.
Okay. Okay, cool. All right, so we have a motion and a second to recommend Taylor Simpson for development at large. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, awesome. Welcome, Taylor.
So just a quick comment on that. We'll have Taylor's application along with 10 city council and CSD board member changes going at the end of February before our March meeting. So
that goes into effect whatever the next meeting.
yeah, so for March, Taylor will be the member. And along with a whole slew of city council changes, including Oceanos and others. So yeah.
Great. Welcome, everyone.
That's a lot of new blood.
Yeah, we were just talking about maybe like it would be worth doing an orientation
so.
or
Yeah.
something for the new folks.
Yeah.
So we'll put our heads together and do something after that. Okay, awesome. Okay, our next item is a presentation from county staff regarding updates to the county's low impact development manual. I'll be handing this off, okay?
I don't have, oh, I can plug that in. Yeah.
Either side, here would be great. We'll put this on for you.
Oh, it's so dangerous.
Want to test it real quick?
Well,
It's working. Excellent. All right.
We got it. Thanks for getting me set up. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ann Gillespie. I'm the County Stormwater Program Coordinator. I wanted to give an overview this afternoon on our low impact development manual and the updates that we're working on to this manual. So quick outline, I'm going to talk a little bit about what stormwater low impact development is specifically in our Central Coast region. The notable features that we're going to be putting into what is now our post-construction stormwater guidebook, and then a little bit about the project timeline for this. So low impact development means a lot of things to a lot of people. In the context of stormwater, the goal is for the developed site to mimic the pre-developed site. So even after we put in the building and the concrete and all the hardscaping, can we make that site mimic the undeveloped watershed where water slows down, spreads out, and sinks into the ground? So we're not talking about straw bale buildings, we're not talking about weed design, we're just talking about getting that hydrology and that water to mimic the natural watershed. And really fundamentally, really trying to end this practice of sending a fire hose of stormwater out to the street and to the nearest waterway. We've seen the impacts of that style of design really start to manifest in Southern California and other developed areas of the state. So that's really the main goal of low impact development, trying to keep that water on site, mimic the natural hydrology, and not just shoot it all out to hardened channels. This is what it looks like in practice. It can be very subtle. It can be something as simple as downspouts coming off of the building into landscaping, or it can be a series of pervious pavers at the front of the building that are taking water off the roof and infiltrating it back into the ground. So it may not be something exotic that you see on a new building. It can be integrated into the landscape. We're actually seeing a lot of features now be proposed underground, so you'll never see them, but they are there. But that's really just kind of to illustrate what we're after, what we're talking about. So within our region, we have what is friendly known as the PCRs, which were adopted in 2013 by our Central Coast Regional Water Board. So these are regional standards, and they actually exceed the state standards for treatment, retention, and management of stormwater once your building is built. So you go all the way through the development process, you build your building. These are the rules that mandate how the water runs off of your building once it's finished. And so these rules really work and focus on new and redevelopment projects in urbanized areas. The county's handbook was created as a supplement to those rules. So this 2013 policy was a very classic policy. I didn't touch me. You shall not, here are the rules. And the county's LID handbook is meant to be an accompaniment of like, here's how. Better? Okay, thank you. And so a little bit where and when these PCR rules are applied. So new construction and redevelopment, you're creating or replacing 2,500 square feet of impervious surface area. These rules start to kick in, and they stepwise up depending on how much more impervious surface you're adding. These rules, the PCRs, apply within all counties, incorporated cities. So all 7 cities are regulating new development under these rules. And then within the county's census designated places. So census designated places, think of our bigger communities. So Oceano, Napomo, Templeton, Avila Beach, our more developed communities are all regulated under these rules for new development. So when we talk about updating our handbook, right? This was our guidebook that came along with the launch of these standards back in 2014. A lot has changed since then. So there's a lot of new technology on the market for managing stormwater. We have had crippling persistent drought, which you all are very well aware of, that has changed our perspective of how we manage water on our sites, particularly irrigation. Our perspectives have changed in how we kind of manage the square footage of some of these sites. And so what we want to do in this update is address some of those new technologies. We want to provide really specific guidance to help expedite plan review, because there are some gray areas that have been really frustrating for both county staff and development staff, and we want to try and get clarity on those. And we want to shift the focus away from like low impact development philosophy into strategy. So our initial handbook was a lot about, this is what low impact development is, these are our goals. And we're really trying to move past that into like, here's the equation, here's the plan check, this is how we can get your project through and built in a compliant manner. So when we call it an update, it's not an update, it's actually a full rewrite. And we are, county staff are taking a very hands-on approach to this, because we really want, our folks who are plan checking and trying to get these projects permitted to be clear on what we're asking for and what we're getting, and making sure that we can kind of expedite this process and that everyone understands the expectations and how we're going to work together to meet these requirements. We are also referencing the best technical resources published by municipalities around the state. The benefit of not doing this sooner is that a lot of major municipalities have already done this. And they have produced beautiful 800-page manuals that we are reading and enjoying. I can assure you, we set like 100-page limit for ourselves. We're not doing the 800-page deal. We're not trying to, write an extensive volume. We really just want to provide good guidance to help this move forward. So I'm just going to run through a few notable features. Like I said, stormwater can be subtle. These are, this is a planted stormwater feature in Los Osos. So we are going to add some really comprehensive guidance for underground infiltration systems. This technology has come online in the last couple of years. It's become extremely popular. Lots of new commercial buildings are asking to install these under their parking lots. So these are essentially a giant leach field for stormwater. And we are working regionally, also with Santa Barbara County, to make sure that we're in line with what our guidelines are for infiltration testing, setbacks, and use restrictions, and also making sure we're caught up with any EPA regulations for these systems. We're really trying to hone in on what the formulas are, what the calculations are, the specific details, and also balancing the strategies for managing county flood control requirements, which are separate from these, but similar. Plants. If you had told me in 2017 plants were going to be so difficult, I would never have guessed. Our early guidance for stormwater features that involve plants was very extensive. You could plant a whole jungle worth of plants, and a lot of them really didn't enjoy being part of stormwater features. So it just wasn't for them. And so what we're trying to do is really refine the list, focus on drought tolerant natives, plants that we know are tough and are happy to live in this boom bust cycle where they're going to be underwater and then they're going to be sitting in a dry feature for several months. And so we're working really closely with quite a few professionals to figure out plant palettes that have been successful and have those commonly desired traits. Expanded guidance for source control, and that's a really fancy way of saying sometimes we lose sight of what we're trying to do. And it could be something as simple as like, we didn't build a trash enclosure large enough, so now the dumpster lives outside next to the storm drain. So really trying to kind of incorporate like, where are we placing things? Can we think, in a stormwater pollution prevention standpoint as we're doing our site design? And so our previous guidebook kind of sent you off on this wild goose chase to find strategies. We're just putting them in the book now, so you can just literally use a checklist to say, here's how we're meeting this criteria. Operations and maintenance. So it's only as good as it works long-term. And the county right now enters into agreements that preserves these stormwater elements on properties in perpetuity. That is part of the requirements. And so I think we've got upwards of 50 buildings right now that have these long-term maintenance agreements that they will keep this infrastructure working and in good condition. And so we're going to really make sure we spell out how these agreements work, what everybody's roles and responsibilities are. And we do keep an eye on these structures and make sure things are getting cleaned out and maintained so they stay functional. Lastly, we are going to add some example projects. It was something we said we were going to do on our last handbook and we never got around to it. And so now we're doing it. And these will include some, projects where you're not starting with a blank slate. Maybe you have wetlands or you have setbacks or you have other existing infrastructure. So we really want to give real world examples of how these design strategies can work. So our project timeline. So we started this project in March of 2022. We've got a preliminary draft getting really close to release, and that'll be released in spring of 2023, which is coming right up. We are going to have a technical focus group of reviewers, which anyone is welcome to join. If this is a cause near and dear to your heart and you would like to tell us what this guidebook is missing, we would invite your feedback. And then anticipating our final draft summer of 2023 with a launch workshop this fall. So these are the primary ways to participate and comment on the preliminary draft, which is what is coming out shortly. Attend the launch workshop and training. And that is my whole presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
We're thinking about getting rid of water. The last 4 years, we've been thinking holding as much water for irrigation as possible. I didn't see on-site storage for irrigation purposes as part of this. It was just all getting rid of it. Is there going to be a portion that's going to say you should have assistance or something? Yeah, something that can be used to irrigate the yards and things like that.
So the policy is not as prescriptive to say what you have to build. So it will tell you the volume you have to keep on site, and whether you infiltrate it or reuse it is up to you. So cisterns are one way of doing that. Building a basin is another. Using an underground infiltration tank is a third. So you get those options. What we are adding in to this guidebook that wasn't in there before is rainwater storage guidance. Because the other element, which I know we're all thinking about now, is like that tank fills up and then it keeps raining and keeps raining and keeps raining, and you don't really need that water right away, but now we've got, you know, more water than we know what to do with. So there will be guidance in there for cisterns, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The largest inevitably impermeable surfaces are roofs. And so that can be a source. I don't believe it's a source of drinking water, but it certainly could be a source for external use. So are there incentive programs for cisterns or anything like that, aside from simply the incentive of a lower water?
There are a few very small incentives. I think this also CSD has one. I believe there might have been one in Templeton, but right now the incentive, as you said, is to save money.
Thank you.
And
I understand also that the area around, like where eaves drip off and so on, is a particular area where spreading, and you're not collecting it, you're going to want to spread it. For a little while, I was seeing actual chains dropping into the gravel beds rather than, and I haven't seen that in some of the newest construction, but there seemed to be sort of a flash of it for a few years. Is that something that works and should be promoted?
you know, I would say that we have to be careful in what we promote because of setbacks from the foundation. You know, we have to make sure water is off the foundation, and every site is different in terms of where they can put it, how they get it there. So we wouldn't be as prescriptive as saying you need a rain chain, you know, or those types of requirements. But what we would do is say that water that's coming off the roof, tell us your plan. Where does it go? You know, we'll check to make sure it's not near the foundation, that it's not going straight to the neighbor's house. Those are the types of things we're looking for.
And I believe those rain chains they're just a downspout that's an aesthetic.
They're a very nice looking downspout.
Yes. No other functionality beyond a downspout.
Yeah.
So yes, absolutely. Other comments or questions? I have a couple. Can you tell us about the training when that happens? Like who's the target audience for that kind of training? What level is it going to be at?
Yeah, so we, that training and kind of that launch would be for developers, engineers. We are going to make sure that we roll out our preliminary draft to all the incorporated cities because, you know, we share forms and templates and those types of things and want to keep everybody up to date. So I think the workshop in the fall would be kind of similar to one we had a couple of years ago, where it's more technical, running through the different components of the book, what's in there, what's not in there. And the most substantial changes. But yeah, I would say if you're a project proponent, developer, that would be, or even a contractor, would be a good spot.
Okay, thanks. Tim?
Is the draft available now?
Not yet.
Because that would be helpful to have that as soon as, you know, for this group, sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
It gets serious.
Certainly. Make sure we route it through Brendan.
Great. And then, so, again, order of magnitude, so 2,500 square feet of hardscape is the trigger?
That's when it starts, the rules start to kick in.
Okay, and so under that, is there no requirement for?
Under that, your city or CSD gets to decide what the rules are.
Okay.
There are.
Right, yeah. So, okay, so 2,500, so that's pretty large. So that's commercial scale, parking lots, et cetera, that is gonna.
Yeah, so we, I would say the bulk of what we're seeing are commercial industrial buildings, housing tracts, Parcel maps, maybe we're gonna build a cul-de-sac with 5 houses on it. Those types of developments will start to trigger these rules.
Okay, okay, great. And then is there, you mentioned engineers, contractors. I keep thinking the landscape design community, installation community often, which is done kind of on a design build basis and might not otherwise. They might not, anyway, I'm just wondering if that can be or it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the majority of groups we interact with as we're going through plan review are engineering and construction and design firms. Is the landscape design important? Absolutely. And we would love for them to be there. That's just not typically who we're corresponding with the most on the heavier engineering side, how much water, which location, what infrastructure. But certainly that landscape perspective is really valuable.
Tim, then David.
Sorry.
That's why I'm here.
Are you running this through region board now?
We will be.
They gotta get by, they gotta buy in. It's just,
We're expecting lots of comments. There are a few elements that we're working with them as we're working on this preliminary draft, and then yes, expecting extensive comments from them.
Extensive comments. Sounds ominous. Are we
You know,
concerned? Are we challenging?
They have a lot to say.
Yeah.
I think the reason I'm expecting what I would call extensive comments is that this is the first guidebook that's kind of breaking the mold of what we've seen in this region. So the most commonly referenced guidebook in this region is Santa Barbara County's. Most places have adopted that in whole. And this is kind of the first one since the adoption of these rules to kind of come out and give really more precise, detailed guidance, you know, on things that have just been frustrating gray areas for several years.
Right, so more detail would warrant more
interest.
Interest. Yeah, excellent. David.
Something
There
different.
was once a problem in Los Osos where we were having water table rising. I think it was the El Moro, and the county had to build a gigantic drain system to get the water out of there. Will there be a depth to water table analysis so that you don't have the people uphill shoving tons more water into the subsurface and then somebody downhill, somebody that's going there floating? Will there be some kind of regional broad analysis of where water tables are before you decide if you're going to put the water in the ground like that?
There will not be for this as part of this project. So what we will have and what we are specifying through this guidebook is groundwater setbacks, because we want to know that you're not going to install something that will be floating in that location and that there's adequate time for it to percolate. But as far as a larger groundwater regional study, that's not part of what we're looking at.
I would say that's an excellent question. I'll say that I've been living in the same neighborhood for 35 years, and Irish Hills are up here, everything drains down, then there's Los Osos Valley Road, and then on the Laguna Lake side, seeing water over the years just does not drain in the house that's slightly above it. It comes down into the backyard, actually up to the back door level, and before trying to get around and out. And the drainage in that whole subdivision is not excellent. And I can see that would make a difference in a large scale development to know where the water is going to go, how much capability it has to get away before, as part of the development review. I think that would be a very positive aspect to look at.
Well, to Ann's defense, I think that falls under flood control's umbrella, and they will be looking at all of that stuff as part of the development, including, you know, the stuff that you mentioned.
Yeah, will be, but doesn't do anything for what's.
Well.
That's true.
Get your signs out.
Anybody else? Comments, feedback? Do you have enough case studies and examples? It looked like I noticed the agrarian hotel in Arroyo Grande was one of the examples.
There's projects all over the county. So Yeah, no, we're in good shape for example projects. You know, I think the benefit of doing this now, well, the detriment is I feel like I should have done this, we should have started this project 5 years ago. The benefit of doing it now is we've had the time to see a lot of these projects age and see what has worked and what hasn't, which plants have drowned, which have thrived, all of that. And so the benefit of experience is weighing heavily into this update. So
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
but we'll make sure you guys see the draft via Brendan and look forward to hearing from all you.
Great. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks, Ann.
Okay, and then our next item is an open discussion regarding recent storms and flooding. This is our opportunity to share with each other what you saw happening in your communities. We have a few staff folks who are prepared to have some comments, but also just wanting to know what you saw and experienced. And of course, with our purview about water resources, you know, are there, other than kind of just general interest to know how our systems are performing, are there things that we, you know, would want to look at going forward? So anything you can comment on or study further. So do you want to open up the discussion here?
Couple kind of set topics. First, just some brief comments about the intensities of the rainfall and some characteristics of the storm at a high level. And then Brandon here is going to provide an update about Rio Grande Creek in the Oceano area. And then some of you did share some photos and videos with me, so thank you. And I'll throw those up, and if you want to chat about them, that'd be great. And then we can do the open discussion. And I know I'm looking forward to hearing what you all observed. I'm not where you are, but flood control is something I'm close to in my work, and I want to hear about you know, your experiences and what you saw around the county, and that's all going to hopefully inform, you know, what we're going to do and what are the priorities for us, you know, beyond just, you know, our roads crews and roads teams are, you know, very specific to the right of way and doing all the bridges. But if there are opportunities for expanded you know, studies and understanding larger at a watershed scale, and that's where my group would come in. So that's a little bit of why I'm looking forward to hearing our discussion today. So with that, just a little bit of context for discussion. I want to thank Troy from Development Services for putting this together. Kind of looked at our rainfall across the county. You can see here on the table, you know, the various parts of the county experience this rainfall, you know, in different ways. You know, in general, the north coastal area, you know, this is kind of like a normal, quote, amount of rainfall. Now, obviously, things are so saturated prior to the storm. You know, any amount of rain that hits the ground there on January 9th was going to run off, which is a much different scenario than, say, if you all recall, in January 2021, we had a, you know, 8+ inches, then Cambria was in the 12+ inches of rain in one storm. Everything was so dry. We didn't get the flooding like we saw earlier, you know, a few weeks ago. And so, yeah, those saturated soils made a huge difference. Another issue was that the strong winds and early intense rain caused a lot of debris flow, which then jammed up a lot of our culverts and bridges, which intensifies and worsens the flooding. When we look at rainfall, we look, as you can see here, different hour or different time intervals of rain. And, you know, each storm has kind of their own way. And some storms are, oh, this is a normal for an hour. But if that continues, it becomes more rare and more rare. And you can see here, we were getting up to 50-year recurrence, 75-year recurrence. There were parts of the Lopez watershed that were over 100-year recurrence of rainfall. And another thing I want to note, we have also had high tide coincidence with the storm, which really impacted Morro Bay and the whole, not just the city, but the whole Morro Bay watershed and everything there. So I recall South Bay Boulevard closed. One of the first roads was to be closed due to flooding. And then just the last note, kind of comparing, this is pretty obvious, our most significant regional flooding event since 1995. In some cases worse, in some cases not as bad, but widespread, I think similar. I was not here in 1995, but if you were, I'd love to hear about it. So that's a little bit of background on the storms. I guess I will stop here if there's any kind of big questions. Troy is here. If there's kind of any questions about this kind of contextualization of the storm, let's open it up and then we'll move on to AG. Yes.
On the morning of Monday night, how soon was the intensity able to be anticipated? I'm thinking, for example, the regional transit system began its service day, and then at 8 in the morning, they realized we should not have drivers out on the roads. We shouldn't be on the roads. But they had delivered people to their destinations for the day. Then they had to figure out how and when to get them home and let them know there was an option to bring them home, and have some drivers out on the roads taking the risk of getting them home, often with smaller vehicles and so on. But could this have been anticipated, say by 5 or 6 in the morning, so that a general message could have gone out? If you don't absolutely have to go somewhere today, stay home.
I think that's a great question, and I want to say the answer is yes, and I'm hopeful that that's something, you know, between now and the next one, we're able to get some base level of understanding on. But you know, it is hard. Right now you're just kind of looking at a radar and projecting on when it's going to come, or forecasts from the National Weather Service in Los Angeles that aren't, you know, necessarily specific to slow and the really flashy rainfall and runoff that we get here. And so it's I'd say a yes and a no. I'm hopeful that we can develop some tools in the watersheds that we know more about, like Rio Grande, San Luis Obispo Creek, to have, it may not be that exact what you're saying, but something like that I think is possible.
Anyway, I welcome any discussion on how to improve that kind of response. Thank you.
Yeah, I expect it's something we'll talk about at Zone 9. So.
Yeah. And then
Brendan,
Yes, sir.
may I ask a question? This is Greg Graywell.
Sure.
Yeah, I was driving home through Sacramento the day before the storm, got home at 4:30 when it started raining and rained for 24 hours. Sacramento was already flooded. All the electronic signs over I-5 stated, if you don't need to go somewhere, don't be on the road. There's an extreme storm coming in the next 24 hours. The warnings were out there, and I was an LA City fireman for 30 years. I've been on river rescues, trench rescues, cliff rescues, name it, seen it, done it. Okay, and I've been here 21 years. The water pouring out of my place after that 24 hours went for 5 days. It's still pouring out of my ranch, but I have almost an acre and a foot an hour, which is almost 500,000 gallons an hour for the first 5 days, pouring out of my ranch into Creston. And the road problems, because of the mismanagement and the lackadaisical attitude that you don't have to clean out the waterways or the storm drains or the culverts, and the culverts blew out because of poor maintenance and management. We had 2 breaks in the road. They're just being finally fixed on 229. I only have 3 roads around me, 41, 58, and 229 that I live on. And what do you have? You have like $43 million so far on road repair stuff in the county. That's because of mismanagement. That's because of not being prepared. We had plenty of time. The governor came out a week before this storm and said, we're starting our 4th year of drought. And now we're not only in a drought emergency, we're in a flood emergency. So if your job is flood control and water conservation, you didn't control the flood and you didn't do any water conservation. We've been waiting 10 years for storage facilities and stormwater collection. Our basin is full now here in North County. The reason it's full, that's why the water's running off. And I have 21 years of paperwork to show that. So now we need to get on with the fact of what are we going to do? The communities where people live tight and there's asphalt and concrete and roof systems and all this different stuff, they don't absorb any water. The rural lands, which are the watershed, are the ones that provide the water to the basins and do the different things. And then there's diversion reports. So when they're talking about we're going to divert water to here and there, are they reporting to the State Water Control Board and the DWR on their diversions?
So thank you, Greg. I appreciate your comments and chiming in. And it seems, I think you're asking good questions. And so as we continue the discussion, folks can respond, because I think there's, it's a yes and done a lot and more to do, et cetera. I do want to make sure we get a chance to kind of share experiences and then open it up for a cross communication.
We can keep going if you like.
So I'd probably rather keep going. Do you have something brief right now, David?
Yes, the question of the slide up there.
Yeah.
What do those numbers mean? Does that mean the highest effect in the South County was a 75-year storm?
So it's the amount of rain in a 12-hour period is a kind of a once every 75-year recurrence interval, based on statistical models and things like that.
Was that the highest impact anywhere in the county then?
I think from what we've looked at, we've got 125.
From the county's gauge network.
Yeah.
So we have gauges in some areas.
So we have 75-year storm, basically.
Over the South County, the rainfall was 75 years. The flooding is different.
Right. Okay.
Cool. And I'll turn it over to Brandon to share some about AG Creek.
Yep. Thank you.
There you go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brandon Zuniga. I'm a water resources engineer working with our utilities division on some of our response down in the AG Creek, Oceano area in response to those January 9th and 10th storms that we saw. And so, I'm here to kind of just establish what we saw and, how we responded and whatnot, because I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding of what happened out there. So on January 9th, we saw the South Levee overtopping in response to those figures that we saw. There was significant amount of rain. The moisture condition was conducive to producing a lot of the runoff. And so over the course of the day, we saw the South Levee overtopping. And that's when we issued, flooding and mandatory evacuation orders over the course of January 9th. And then overnight between January 9th and the 10th is when the actual South Levee breached just downstream of the Union Pacific Railroad down in that lower Arroyo Grande Creek area. So this is a picture of it on January 10th, the one on the left at least, where the actual levee breached. And then this section right here on the right is just an image of where one of those spots where the levee was overtopping. So that was January 10th. So if you go to the next slide, thank you. So this is also a picture that I took on January 10th. So when the levee breached, we had the creek kind of running into this Cienega Valley area. There were sections of the valley that were about 4 feet. I'd say average depth of 4 feet, but there were some sections that were deeper. I've got some pictures of horses in the area that are pretty much chest deep in water. And so there was also some people stranded at the Oceano Dunes RV Resort Park. And so January 10th, we began to do various operations to repair the levee where it breached. but also to drain the valley so that we could establish access and get the people out of the RV park. Also on January 10th, we had some of our OES and Sheriff's Department doing some boat rescues and sending generators and ice and supplies to the RV park as well. So I think the priority that day was just establishing access and trying to get those people out because we still had another storm coming in that coming weekend. So that was January 10th. And this is kind of a map just showing some of the sites. So is this a point there? Yes. So down here is where the levee breached. And then this area down here is kind of what was all flooded, even further down than this map shows. And so we initiated the manual breach of the south levee down here to drain because the county has some existing culverts down here that are, it's 2 36-inch ductile iron pipes, but you know, if we waited for those to drain the valley, it'd probably take upwards of a week. So that's where we initiated that manual breach. And then we also had some spots on the north levee that were damaged. So we had some severe scouring on the inside slope here of the north levee. And then we also had these spots that had some conduit flow coming through the levee and likely from ground squirrels and gophers just kind of creating their holes. And then as the water level rises, you have more water pressure just kind of blowing it out essentially. And so we began work that week to repair all these different spots and with the coming storms of that weekend. And so by January 11th, we began repair of these other various spots. So we put a layer of Vice Queen sandbags to just kind of reinforce the inside slope where we saw those blowouts. And then we also have placed some RSP rock slope protection on the inside slope next to the mobile home park where we saw some of that very severe scouring. There were some sections of the levee where, the inside slope had been scoured so bad that, it was the levee access road and then just a drop. So we wanted to make sure that we protected all those areas as quickly as possible. And so these are some pictures of today. So where that levee was repaired, where I showed that picture in the first slide, where this big hole has now been completely replaced with a mixture of rock and class 3 base. We've dewatered the hole behind and filled it with some fill as well to kind of make sure that we don't jeopardize the integrity of the levee at that spot. And then we've also completed the RSP repairs on the inside slope of the levee by the Duna Vista Mobile Homes Park as well. We're still working on some long-term solutions to that section of the north levee that I mentioned that has those blowouts, because what's in place there is definitely temporary and we need to figure out what the best solution is there, whether it's a full levee replacement, whether it's some kind of slurry wall or cutoff wall. All that's still being worked on at the moment. And we've got some surveys that were conducted this past week to determine what kind of capacity we have in the levee as well. So I think that should be it for the slides. Yeah, I think that's those photos that were shared. But if anyone has any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, how would this knowledge that we have from this situation affect the implementation of Central Coast Blue? If Central Coast Blue were in place, how would it have been affected? And where is Central Coast Blue in terms of sort of the decision-making process? What decisions are still ahead of us?
I don't think we know that one.
Yeah, not too familiar with the central.
I see Jim, right? Jim from AG.
So the location for the Central Coast Blue plant is actually on 4th Street, relatively far away. So if you think about 4th Street, let's say halfway between Farrell and Seattle, somewhere in that area. So where the plant is located is not like the sanitation. Without any, but the Central Coast Blue is pretty far away from this location. Where it's at is hard to say, but it's moving along. I mean, it's going to happen. They've already purchased the land for it. It is not long. The initial JPIA has been.
There is still some approvals pending.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
I see Jeff Edwards online. Jeff, did you have a question?
Thank you. Yes, I was curious as to when the releases were stopped at Lopez Lake. What,
Definitely,
what day, when?
they definitely weren't releasing during these storms. I want to say it was even before this set of storms, like at some point in December, releases were stopped in response to some storms that we had coming in, as well as any cloud seeding. So long before this storm, we'd stop releasing. I can't give you an exact date, but I can follow up and ask.
That would be great. If you could follow up, I'd appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Question. Linda, then David.
Why did the levee breach? You know, I think everybody realized that the south levee was constructed lower than the north step levee, anticipating that it would overtop. But what happened that it actually breached?
Yeah, I think personally, we're still conducting a lot of analyses, but based on what I've seen, the storm exceeded the design capacity of the channel. We got 10-year flood protection, and as you saw, we were having some up to 75-year storm interval. So I think that was a part of it, but also that Union Pacific Railroad Bridge is not great for hydrology. And so what you have there is, at least during the storm, you have a lot of debris collecting, and it forces a lot of that water to come out significantly faster than if it was clear of some of that debris. And so that spot right south of that is exactly where that water was just kind of forcing its way out and overtopping. So I think in large part, just from our constraints with some of those bridges, yes.
But in 2001, when the levee initially breached, it was caused by debris coming in and a big log jamming over on the north levee, which then redirected water over and just crossed the levee wide open.
Yeah.
And it looked to me like the breach, I was out there a week later looking, and I couldn't get over to where the breach is. And I hadn't realized that it actually breached it.
Yeah.
And it appeared to me that the flooding was not as bad as in 2001. I might be wrong.
I wasn't around in 2001 on the extent of that flooding, but I think that's also a possibility too, because one of our operators said that I think that Thursday or Friday when they were doing work to repairing the levee, at one point a train came by on the railroad and it dislodged this pretty massive log that was stuck under the trestle. And so that also could have compounded to it, but that was just an observation. So not sure yet, but those are kind of what we suspect at least. Yes.
I believe during the earlier event, Lopez was still. And one hates to think of Lopez in full spill with what we had.
Yeah.
And the state, of course, has come up with this report on the ARK. So county-wide, are we preparing for a whole bunch more water on a more regular basis than we have been planning for in the past? I mean, look at the old core 100-year floodplain stuff is probably nonsense now. What is happening in terms of terror?
David, I'm going to pause on that because I feel like that's a bigger question than this specific item. So let's hold that thought.
Well, may I say that it was pertinent to how high you build your levees.
Yeah.
So we were talking about preventing the next flood, and I was wondering how high they might want to build it in thinking of the future.
Fair enough.
Yes. Yeah, and a lot of that analysis will be conducted as part of determining some of these long-term solutions. We're already kind of starting to look at the potential for other ways to mitigate any potential future storms, whether that be flood easements, whether that be raising the levees even more. all that's going to come as part of our analysis of, what went wrong here and how can we prevent this in the future.
Great, thank you so much. And then, yeah, we can continue the discussion.
Cool. Yeah, so we got a few photos. Just wanted to share an example of the debris flow. I mentioned earlier there were high winds, early on in the storm, and just an example of, what kind of things were happening across the county with, down debris, clogging up streams and exacerbating issues. So this is here in Santa Margarita. And then
The Nacimiento pipeline in this picture somewhere.
I think it's. further
anyone
north.
see it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's further north than the location.
And then Christine sent in a photo of Laguna Lake, right?
Yes, that's my backyard.
Is that your fence?
Well, that's the side fence. The back fence is behind those trees. It's 6 feet deep at my back fence, at 4-foot fence. In 1995, it was a little higher. Actually, it came up to the sidewalk, that little corner you can see on the right side. It was up a little bit higher in 1995. That fill in back, that little point there is all fill that my neighbor has put in there in the wetlands there. And that little knoll was almost underwater in 95. I had in January of 1995, I had 17.44 inches, but then it was more saturated by the time March came around in 1995. And at that time, I had 8 inches in a 24-hour period when the water was coming up and up. I only had 17.27 inches in this January. But next door to me, it's a group of students, and they were having a ball. They put on wetsuits and got their kayaks out, and they were kayaking over into my yard and into that neighbor's yards around the edge of Laguna Lake is over far to the right, and then up to the far north on the right is Foothill Road, and it was just all underwater. I've had 30.44 inches so far this year, including September. There were over 44 inches in 1995 total. But this is a floodplain. Behind me, that's the Let It Be Nature Preserve. And it comes up fast, and it came up a couple of times, not quite that far, but then drained off. But then over the days, as we got more rain, it became more saturated. So during this one period here on the 9th, it came on up. But then in the next day or two, it was mostly drained off with little pockets. But from Laguna Lake all the way out to Foothill, the wetland is still flowing and pulling deep out there.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing. Deborah from Templeton CSD sent in these photos. You want to share it all?
So what you see on the left is one of our ponds. It's a percolation pond. So the water has been treated. It is now being percolated to the groundwaters of the Salinas River. And what you have is the Salinas River breached and came into the pond. The water's been treated, but it's not drinkable. So it was reported on KSBY as a sewer spill, but it's really not sewage water since it's been treated. The photo on the right is the same pond the next day. And you can see how the water has receded. You can't see it too well in this photo, but the fence that you see on the left at the top of the photo is actually, right there's the fence, and then you see it over on the right. I don't know if it's right over there.
That's that same.
Yeah, so this had to be reported to the water board as a spill. So that's something that I think
no one has seen in the past. So this is something new,
Yeah.
so. And now we're assessing to see what damage has been done to that pond. But I can tell you that pond, I've never even seen it on the photo on the right, even that high. It's usually at least 12 feet below that edge of the pond.
Wow. Thanks, Deborah. And then Nick from City of Slow sent us some photos. So I've kind of got a series of photos. Nick, you want to tell us where this is?
Do you want to come up, Nick?
He doesn't know which photos I picked.
Oh, okay.
So this is Center Creek. This is the road that kind of runs back behind Cal Poly. To the left there is our water treatment plant. We actually had a number of staff that were stranded at the water treatment plant because of flooding here. It's interesting, so that road that kind of goes up towards the water treatment plant there, running just on this side of that road is the main pipeline that delivers water from treatment plant to the city. And so there was some concern about the overtopping of that road. There's actually a creek that runs underneath that road, which you can't see here because of the flooding. Luckily, the pipe, there was no damage to the pipe, no issues with the surrounding area around the pipes, and no repairs needed. But that was definitely one of our primary concerns.
Moving down the watershed.
Yeah, so this is a nice video of San Luis Obispo Creek running through downtown. To give you aware of this area, how low the water usually is. And you can see the sediment within there too.
Both the level and the speed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that patio or sidecar patio?
Yeah.
Yeah, sidecar. Yeah.
I think that's sidecar actually.
Oh,
Yeah. It went pretty much all the way up to the, you can see the walls there. It, covered the sidewalks along the side. People usually walk
And then that led right down to here.
right down to there. Yep, that's
Marsh Street.
Marsh Street. So we had flooding on Marsh Street Bridge was closed because of flooding. The on ramps and off ramp at Marsh Street and 101 were closed because of flooding. So on the left there is South Higuera. Flooded also because of the creek. On the right there, I believe it is over by Laguna Lake, the ocean. This actually, we don't have a picture of it, but if you're familiar with the city and where our facilities are, San Luis Obispo Creek runs right past our water resource reclamation facility. And that whole site also flooded. Luckily, because of the quick work of the staff, we didn't have heat spills. It's pretty remarkable considering that you
Nick, I drove right up to South Higuera and had to turn around on High Street. It was like a raging river. I couldn't believe it. I've never seen it like that. I was here for the first and in '95, and I'm just curious, was that because of debris that was overbanking like that, or was it just sheer volume?
Probably a combination of the two, to be honest with you. If you walked San Luis Obispo Creek after flood waters receded, you noticed quite a bit of debris.
The Mid-Higuera plan, specific plan for the future is encourages any new buildings and remodels to be lifted up because you mentioned Zone 9 earlier. We're planning a multi-million-dollar project that the city's been looking at forever, just in that point, just from the Marsh Street Bridge down to beyond Lake, putting in a bench in there and opening up a little bit of a pinch point. Many millions of dollars to bring that section of creek up to a 25-year flood. So the creek is always going to jump out at Marsh and elsewhere, and Mid-Higuera is considered part of our flood plan for water when we have really big rains like this. We're never, the city was built when we little narrow creeks. You've got Isler and Stenner and Profumo eventually, everything coming into this little narrow creek that built, and the city's built all right down in this floodplain. So unfortunately, we don't always educate people well enough to know that this is a distinct possibility in a large area of our landscape and areas in the downtown of San Luis Obispo. If we're not having a flood now, there's going to be another flood later. So be aware and because that's just how it is. And Marsh Street is built on a marsh. Everything else is just coming in there. Like the water you saw at my house, it goes in the Laguna Lake under Madonna Road out to the Bruno Creek there to go meet at Los Osos Valley Road into Los Osos to get into the San Luis Creek, but the creek is already full and there's no room for any more water. So all of this confluence from the whole watershed, there are no natural conveyances that can carry.
One interesting thing about that is, if you look at the old AXH Soil Conservation Service photographs before anything was built on the west side of the freeway by Madonna, you can actually see there was a bulging of the creek because there were strands of whiter sediment that go all the way across where they're building and where the auto parks and everything else. So that, that may have been a factor into the spill. I don't know which did that, but it was very clearly obvious that it spilled bank on the west side across that flood.
Well, I have photographs back, I think it's 73 or the 69 flood, but where Margie's Diner and Los Osos Valley Road and the freeway's underwater. And you probably saw some of the photographs too, from the freeway over here at Marsh Street exit was underwater during this rain. During this rain, incredible photograph, both lanes of Marsh Street underwater. I mean, the freeway underwater at Marsh Street exit. So these events are going to continue to come periodically. And I know I have neighbors saying, well, we've got the Dredge Laguna, we've got the Dredge Laguna. Well, Laguna can only carry a small amount of water. And then once it does, it's just part of the whole Profumo floodplain. And it's not going to go out any faster than it's going out right now. So, yeah, it's interesting. I'm sorry for loss and damage, but I have to say, I just really love the rain. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, the rain reservoir.
Oh, love it.
Those are all the photos I have.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have any, without photos, things they want to share, what they observed, experienced? Anyone who hasn't spoken up yet? Or Colin, David? David?
Yeah, Choro Creek and Los Osos Creek. There needs to be some revision of what the flood levels like we expected are on those creeks. Because what the Ora Bay people wanted when they were saving the bay was to stop sediment from going into the bay. And the Resource Conservation District brought back the old willow woodlands that were in the mouths of both those creeks. They've been incredibly efficient at holding back the sediment going into the bay. As a result, for example, when you walk down to the pump station that the golf course used to use in those willows, the standing water level of the creek was 4 feet above that, held back by sandbags at normal low water. So the situation there is that probably any old calculations of what the 100-year storm would do in those two floodplains probably needs to be rethought, at least looked at. And the other issue is you saw what had happened in the railroad bridge with stuff on it. Well, that's also happened in the willows. So in the willow forest, anything that came down lodged into trees, and that again slowed the water flow through the willows. Great for dumping sediment, but not good for backwater. So I know there are a lot of houses that were flooded in Choro Creek, upstream of all that. And they are built well enough, almost obvious floodplain. But the situation might get worse as the saving of sediment going to Morro Bay becomes more successful.
But I will also, and I was aware of this, of the high tides. Because when I was overlooking at Los Osos Creek coming out,
A lot of these old flood maps assume like a medium tide, like a mean tide, not a storm tide.
Yeah,
Just that real quickly to Roy Brady, that he did have 7 homes that were flooded, but it's on Tally Hill Creek, which is a much smaller creek. Feeds in just towards after it's flooded. It actually brings up much larger watershed, you know, for the Canyon area. And in 95, they flooded as well. A lot of people built their homes higher. A lot of the new stuff that we built for drainage worked really well. You go out Frenchtown Road, where the farmland was there when Creekside was built out there. They put in a big drainage system, very extensive drainage system. Which worked really, really well. There was some failure on Frenchtown Road on the other side of the road. The new development here on Cherry, that water carried through without any problem at all, even though it was actually somewhat narrow when they built that project. We did have another flooding event behind the high school there, where the new drainage system, the new road we put in, couldn't take our capacity and flooded out. And the creek did get high enough that debris damaged, even more damage to the hanging bridge. So it's closed now. It's set for some major repairs anyway. And then we have a lot of new built up on the traffic way. Problem right now.
I know the city, we've, you know, like everywhere, right? You do a lot of preparation. I'm just super grateful for how, you know, 2 years worth of catching up on tree trimming and debris clearance. So could have been a lot worse if there hadn't been so much proactive preparation for that. So really grateful to everyone. Nick.
Yeah, I do want to make a comment about just how it affects our operations as far as water resources. Obviously, seeing the reservoirs come up was really nice. Salinas spilled over 100% capacity. Obviously, there's the issue with the Nazi pipeline that got damaged, so we can't actually receive Nazi water right now. Luckily, we have Salinas and Whale Rock to pull from. However, you know, with the sedimentation issues because of the amount of water and how quickly it flowed into the reservoirs, we are primarily on Whale Rock right now because Salinas is just awful water quality. I don't know if you've seen pictures or videos of it, but it looks like chocolate milk. It looks like the creek.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's interesting. You get a lot of water, but then you have to be very selective on how you actually utilize it.
Thanks. That additional comment.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think the nexus of the low impact development conversation that we just had, Greg Graywall's comments earlier about, you know, how do we capture when we have all this? I mean, I just think it's on everybody's radar as we're wanting to, you know, replenish our groundwater as best we can when that rain is here, and you know, what are the pieces we can put into place? That's mostly county kinds of efforts.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
private.
Or private,
Yeah.
sure, or private. Thanks. All right, I want to go ahead and wrap up. Are there any last comments, either online or in the room, about the storm response before we move on? Linda?
I want to say that I really appreciate the fact that over the last 15 years or so, WRAC has worked to set up the radio and stream gauges
Yeah.
online, and you can watch in real time what's happening, and I love this.
You need to watch the accumulation of the lines of
Yeah, our city manager talked about looking at the water level gauge at that Marsh Street Bridge and like, okay, sounding the alarm.
Nick sent a picture of it underwater.
Oh,
so
yeah.
they got it back up by Friday for the second storm.
Yeah,
So.
right. So I close it. All right, so let's breeze through the rest of this ongoing updates. I'm just gonna say them real quick and just holler if you have some comments from our ongoing updates, rain and reservoir report. That's the end. It was like 350,000 agency. So, awesome. Drought monitor,
One
so,
comment on that
sure.
as well. And I don't know if there are any fire professionals here, but I am hoping that the trees finally, the established native trees finally got fully watered into their root zones such that the actual fuel moisture will be up for a while into this coming dry season compared to last year's. There may be a lot of
Right,
extra
gravity.
growth as
Yeah, yeah,
well,
yeah.
but if the trees are healthier and juicier and better protected, that may be some very good news there.
Yeah, thank you, too. Let's see, groundwater basin management, I noticed the San Luis Obispo basin instead of meeting mid-March, it has been settled for March 15th at 3:30. Pretty sure, so if anybody's interested in the San Luis Obispo in the Valley Basin.
Do we know when we'll hear back from the DWR on the Paso GSP?
I don't know about Paso, I don't know about San Luis, it's a black box.
I'd
right?
ask Blaine if he wants that,
Blaine,
if Blaine's still on, if he would
Yeah.
answer that.
he's still on. Do you have?
What was the question?
Sorry, we're wondering about if there's been any indication about when the Paso Basin might come back from DWR, the plan.
We heard earlier this week from DWR that the Paso Basin, which is included in the single plan basins, are to be released before the end of March. So that's what we were told Monday.
Great, thank you. All right, National Water, IRWM.
The application was submitted yesterday,
Woo, all
so
right.
I have my job back, is how it feels. Very excited.
Eric.
Just sort of a follow-up question relative to the conversation with Jim Guthrie. I note that there's a grant for another piece of Central Coast Crew and a huge total that needs to be amassed. About how much of the total is now in hand and how much is still being collected? Or needs to be acted on?
Yeah, I don't have that.
But it's in the middle somewhere.
I don't think that they have 50%. Well, I guess I would say this, all of the agencies, based on what the initial price estimates have, potential rate increases that would cover several plus as proposed. As far as how much balance is coming through, I don't know.
Thank you.
All right, master water report updates, anything?
Not a lot to report. We've kind of finished the main data and information audit phase. So hearing from our partner agencies and other departments in the county and local agencies, about how they use countywide and regional water. Obviously, if those can still come in, but the main chunk of that outreach is done. And now we're starting to aggregate and compile. And the next step is really like, what are we doing IT wise? How are we setting up the software? How are we setting up our databases? So the consultant can build it on their end and then we can eventually host it. So it's in that kind of realm right now. But when appropriate, we'll definitely come back to the group and provide an update.
Great. State water project. Desal. Any other county water programs, conservation, any open reporting?
Yes, planting ordinance. I don't know, if the supervisors look like they might be reversing what the last board did. But is there any interaction between our group and the suits and the department in regard to planting ordinance?
It's specific to that Paso.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's still.
The retreating is on the agenda for next Tuesday afternoon. But further steps, I don't think I haven't yet seen the staff report, just the cover agenda. So all I know is that they set a hearing to rescind the ordinance, but and basically go back to the previous ordinance, but the question of whether there's a subsequent drawing board and what steps will be taken, I don't know. There might be something in item documents for that item by the time we get home.
Right, okay, so it takes off what was supposed to, which was gonna take effect in March. That one is now going to be gone presumably based on the
hearing was
directive.
set for the action to rescind it, so it will probably get a majority vote. It hasn't yet been rescinded, but it will be heard in County Government Center, probably, it's the last item of the day, probably mid-afternoonish sometime next Tuesday.
Right, and then it defaults back to what the current moratorium is. I'm getting a.
I don't believe
Yeah.
the de minimis is attached to that particular action, but I think there's an intent to drop the threshold on the de minimis as well.
So, yeah, Brent,
I'll just add, it's mostly correct. I think everything I heard, they will go back exactly as it was before the ag offset ordinance. So it'd be back to 5 acre feet de minimis, unless you're in the area of severe decline, which is the red, not the red zone. But
okay,
they will rescind the ordinance itself, decertify the EAR, and then do an extension of the old offset ordinance that was set to expire sometime this year, for 5 more years to 2028.
okay. And so then does the rest of it kind of fall under the GSP process? So it wouldn't make sense for it to come back to WRAC, because that was kind of the way that we've been operating, is that each basin is having its own autonomy on process and decisions. Okay, great, thank you.
Just one more note on that. Planning sent over the notice of hearing to me like a couple hours before the meeting. So I'm gonna post that on our meeting page. If anyone wants to check that out, I'm sure it's on planning's website, but we'll have it on our WRAC website as well, the notice of hearing for that.
Great, thanks. Any other open reporting for the ongoing updates? Okay, future agenda items, we will get that bylaws review on the next meeting agenda, reservoir updates, and then we have John Lindsay coming in to give us kind of the macro weather.
I think so. That's the plan. That's the hope.
Plan.
Yeah.
That was really, got to.
Ray's shaking his head. Yes.
Yes,
So-
okay, great. So yeah, so that'll be super. And then any public comment for items not on the agenda? We strategically put this at the end. It's a tradition. Any other, Jeff?
Yes, Madam Chair. The concept about rainwater capture and storage, is that going to be an agenda item at some point? That seemed to be widely, there was some wide interest in that.
Yeah, so rainwater capture and storage, we did do, yeah, it would be interesting to kind of get that from the
Potential, storage potential.
we recently had Perlu Landscapes come in here and do a kind of a study session to present some larger scale rainwater capture projects. It was available.
If I may, I don't know if any of the folks remember, but in the late 80s, there was the Coastal Streams Diversion Project. And they were proposing to deploy inflatable or rubber dam systems. And so with these high rain events, I think we might want to consider inflatable or rubber dam systems in some of our streams as a way to capture the water, and storage is certainly a piece of that. So in light of what appears to be a hallmark of climate change, that is the series of ARs, I think it might be worth discussing bigger picture capture and storage projects.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Yeah, add that to the list if you have specific speakers in mind, that always helps. I know these meetings are, they're typically allowed, we block out 1:30 to 3:30, but this one says we were gonna get done at 3, so I apologize. Thank you for folks who stayed over a little bit longer, but I do want to make sure, any other public comment for items not on the agenda? Yeah.
So the Slow Beaver Brigade's fundraising event, February 3rd and 4th, is all sold out. So Thanks to all the support from the community for that, but I wanted to mention that April 1st in Mission Plaza, we'll have the first annual Slow Beaver Festival. So hope to see you all there.
Yay, we've become big fans of the Beaver Brigade, so thank you. We're in the fan club for sure. Anybody else? All right, and with that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting until our next regular meeting, March 1st, 2023, 1:30, back here in the library community room, in person, if you can, for sure, if you're a voting member, and otherwise online, we're always happy. Thanks, everyone.
Very good, nice meeting, thank you.